This is Jerome Corsi, and today is Thursday. It's April 27th, 2023, and lots going on. We have lots to cover today. I'm going to get right into it. I wrote a story that was picked up yesterday. I'm going to be writing a series of stories with the Gateway Pundit, and what this is about is essentially showing that the Biden crime family story is not going away. It's going to get starting to be picked up more and more by the mainstream media. The Democrats seem to be right at the moment satisfied to have Biden as their candidate. He's basically a placeholder. He's an official greeter. I guess he can glad hands and gives a speech and can read off a teleprompter mostly. I don't think it's really the kind of thing that we're going to find long term as the idea of a real president. But within the Democratic Party, I watched Susan Rice left the White House. She's always been kind of the shadow president, very closely tied to Barack Obama. Between Susan Rice and Valerie Jarrett, I wouldn't be surprised if Obama isn't planning to have Michelle Obama run and Biden step aside. Certainly there's going to be a battle within the Democratic Party. We have contesting forces here going on with Gavin Newsom, who's in California, the governor, seeking to also want to be president. So you're going to have a major battle, I think, within the Democrats. They're kind of stuck with Biden. It's hard to get rid of a sitting president. And I guess Kamala Harris will be doing a lot of the campaigning, and she has problems with the popularity. But what's going to happen is, I think, the Biden crime family story now with Biden running for president is going to be front and center. Mainstream media is going to have to cover it. And I think hearings will happen, and the story is going to be one that will be difficult to suppress. So we're going to be watching it. I'll be writing a series of stories and on the whole nature of the corruption, because it involves Ukraine, it involves China. It's actually a complicated story when you get into the details of it, but it's going to be very interesting to follow. All right, let's continue with a couple more stories that I want to cover as quickly as we can. But I do want to give them attention. The story is out with Italy. Meloni. Italy now has a female prime minister who is quite conservative, Giorgia Meloni, and she's really tired of the whole deal with China. Now, Italy was one of the first G7 countries to sign on China's Belt and Road Initiative. And their Belt and Road Initiative is very ambitious. What it means is they're essentially building overland routes from China all the way through to Spain and all covering Europe, through Kazakhstan, through Iran. And also they have maritime routes in this, and they have pipelines. It's basically expanding China's reach throughout all of Europe. And ultimately, I believe they'll extend it down further into Africa. It's China's expansion economically to essentially become a dominant world power. Now, what basically Meloni wants to do is pull out of the agreement to join this controversial Belt and Road Initiative, which is funding $900 billion in infrastructure projects globally. And I think Italy is coming to realize that working with these internationalist groups like China is not in Italy's best interest. We've got the same thing happening in Poland. There's a story today that is being pretty widely covered. I saw it first on Zero Hedge, where the Poles, a survey was taken, and the Poles are really very opposed to a lot of the initiatives that the EU is taking. 67% of the respondents in this poll in Poland said that they're opposed to a EU rule that will ban combustion engines starting in 2035. The idea of the EU ban is only supported by 28% of the Polish people. They are also opposed to a lot of the different globalist initiatives. They don't want a cashless society. The European Parliament has really recently recommended a digital euro to be launched. And again, cashless societies, I think, seriously infringe upon personal freedom. The ability of the government to monitor every single thing we do, every penny we spend, to know exactly what we're doing every minute of our lives. This is not the kind of government that is conducive to freedom. So essentially, this World Economic Forum lobby, which is Klaus Schwab, which dominates a lot of the thinking of the EU, is countries like Poland, Hungary, Italy are beginning to say no. Hungary has also been very, very strong at having a limit to their immigration. They don't want to be flooded with the immigrants coming out of the Middle East or Africa. Italy's got that problem as well. The EU right now is really dealing with a situation that I think has been brewing for several years, where I think the EU is likely ultimately to break up. I saw also a story that the EU is now further going to try to limit the Russian natural gas. They're going to try to cut off any liquid natural gas shipments from Russia that come in through the sea, not just through the pipelines. Again, I think that's suicidal on Europe's part. But the whole agenda that we've got going right now, the economic agenda, is basically kind of a suicidal agenda. And finally, I think some countries like Italy, Hungary, Poland are realizing that the EU is on this globalist path that will benefit Germany to the detriment of the rest of the countries. And Germany is not doing particularly well, cutting off its last nuclear power plants and trying to go entirely green. This, again, is an agenda where I think we're going to see constantly the deterioration of the Western economies, because the expense of energy is one of the fundamental aspects that cause inflation. And inflation's deadly. We're going to see it increasing in the United States again. Energy prices are going to go up dramatically, especially as Europe cuts down on nuclear power altogether. And this is a situation where the coming, I think, economic collapse is almost certain. There was so much news today. I was following even this Republic Bank. The Republic Bank is in dire straits. It has lost most of its equity value. Trading was stopped on it. It lost 50% of its value, stock value, and then it lost another 30%. I mean, this stock is virtually worthless. The problem with First Republic Bank, is that it has taken on so much bad debt. They specialized in financing for wealthy people, these huge mortgages, which today are overpriced, and the properties can't be sold given the high inflation rates, causing mortgage rates to go to 5 or 6%. So First Republic has basically lost about $100 billion in deposits in the first quarter. So there are signs all around that the Europe and the United States are going into a very serious recession. I want to make one more point, and then I'll ask Chris to comment. But the story I want to cover has to do with the commercial real estate, which is basically in San Francisco is just collapsing. Here is an article that is today in the Wall Street Journal, I believe, that's saying essentially California before the pandemic was, the office downtown spaces was filled. It was doing some of the world's most valuable real estate. There's a corridor that runs right through the heart of the financial district up into the main part of San Francisco city. And on California Street, one of the 22-story glass and stone towers, which was worth $300 million in 2019, the building is now for sale. and they will be lucky to get in $60 million, which is an 80% decline in 4 years. Why? Well, because the building is mostly empty. You're finding across the city in San Francisco and other major cities, the reduced office worker turnout coming to work in an office has been dramatic across the United States. It has not recovered since the pandemic. So many of the cities in San Francisco, these Silicon Valley companies that are now have office space in San Francisco, Salesforce, Facebook's parent, Meta, they're essentially flooding the market with saying that they have space for sublet, and they want to do that rather than waiting for their leases to expire. The lack of office workers throughout the financial district also then impacts restaurants, retailers, other small businesses. Nearly 30% of San Francisco's office space is vacant, which is more than 7 times the rate before the pandemic hit. Now, this is serious because the banks hold the loans on these buildings. When the buildings are collapsing and the banks cannot be bailed out, those loans are still there. So the people who own these buildings, or the corporations that own these buildings, are going to face bankruptcy situations very quickly. This happens across the country. It's going to impact the banking system because the banks hold these loans. It's very similar to what happened when the subprime real estate market collapsed. And these are all signs that I don't think are immediately reversible. You've got the determination with the Biden administration to have this solar, wind, and battery economy. And that, I think, is just economic suicide again. All the steps being taken in Europe and the United States are counterproductive to economic growth. And they are fundamentally neo-Marxism because they're attacking capitalism. And that, I think, is the underlying agenda. It's an agenda that just won't work. It's negative. It's destructive. I heard Tucker Carlson gave a short Twitter message in which he was basically saying the power of the truth will survive and will win. I agree with that. The books I'm writing right now, The Truth About Energy, Global Warming, and Climate Change, my next book coming out, The Truth About Neo-Marxism, Cultural Maoism, and Anarchy. The truth is fundamental to what we are as human beings. And the rules which God created for this place have to do with the truth being rewarded. Many biblical sayings is the truth will ultimately out. It can never be completely hidden. Chris, you want to comment?
On our side of the country, the Flatiron Building was sold recently for $190 million. But after
Right.
McMillan moved out, they couldn't refill the place. And after the whole COVID thing and the pandemic and people not really wanting to return to the office, it's been very difficult for even the most iconic buildings in the nation to fill when it comes to commercial real estate. That is a huge warning sign for not only here, but probably the rest of the West, if you think about it. If the trend is for companies to reduce overhead by keeping more remote workers and contractors who are, let's say, working out of their home. I said work a lot of times, but you understand where I'm going. These commercial buildings are going to have to find another way to bring people in. And yes, like you said, the ripple effect is local businesses, delis, breakfast places,
Right.
places to go after work. They could fall as well. The banks holding these loans, plus the policies and the extra expense of, I'm going to say it, the bloated DEI departments that are costing a lot of money to businesses and banks.
Well, and you add to it also the mounting regulations, which we've covered this week. The SEC is now thinking corporations across the country are going to have to report their emissions, and not only their emissions, but the power they use and their suppliers and the power they use. I mean, this is going to be the Washington's got completely out of control, and these bureaucrats are now imposing regulations that meet their ideological agenda, but are fundamentally anti-growth, anti-capitalism. I want to focus on our sponsors for a minute, especially to start with Swiss America. Swiss America is a gold, silver, platinum company. They've been in the precious metals business for 25 or 30 years. I've worked with them extensively. And if you look on the homepage and you go up to the sponsors, click our sponsors, and you'll see Swiss America, this Walking Liberty $50 offer, which is, I think, spectacular. Yeah, these coins have about 90% silver, and on a first-time basis, introductory basis, if you fill out this form, Swiss America will contact you. You can buy up to 250 of these, about at cost of what the silver's worth. And I really encourage you to talk with Swiss America, get some consultation about having gold or silver, which is tangible value, as we go into a situation where the dollar is going to become this fiat dollar is likely to collapse. The world is de-dollarizing. Our debt level is excessive. We go into another recession like 2008, 2009, when gold doubled. It could do it again. It's not going to happen immediately, but we're at the very early stages of entering into what I see as a very deep recession. So please take a look at Swiss America. I have worked with them for years. They're quite good. They're honest. They will consult with you, and you'll get real gold, silver, platinum, not certificates, not shares, not stocks. All right, let's go. Let's continue. We've still got a lot of news to cover today. I want to go back to the main the homepage, in which we will cover a couple more climate issues. First of all, RFK Jr., Robert Kennedy Jr., I've been debating whether there's a good article on Climate Depot today, which is Mark Morano, who I dedicated my book to on the truth about energy, global warming, and climate change. RFK has some of it right. He did an interview yesterday, and he was basically saying that the climate and pollution issues are being exploited by the World Economic Forum and Bill Gates and all these big mega billionaires the same way COVID was exploited. It's a excuse to clamp down, top-down totalitarian controls in society, and then to give us engineering solutions. Now, he's right about that. And I think he's always been an environmentalist. But where I disagree with him is he is against hydrocarbon fuels. He's saying basically, in terms of the carbon industry, all the things that people are trying to promote to end carbon, we should be doing anyway. Carbon means cutting down all the mountains of West Virginia. It means we'll have polluted 2,200 miles, 2,200 miles of rivers, streams in eastern Kentucky, West Virginia, etc. He's been an environmentalist, and he doesn't understand basically that hydrocarbon fuels can be mined much better than they used to be able to be mined. It doesn't destroy everything. You're not strip mining West Virginia to get coal. We are able to burn these hydrocarbon fuels much cleaner, and they are relatively inexpensive. So I just want to get a corrective in here on Robert Kennedy Jr. I mean, a lot of what he goes for, I like. He does see the corruption of big government. He understands that entirely, especially with his with Jack Kennedy being assassinated, with his father being killed by an assassin's bullet. He realizes the lies government tells. He realizes the tyranny impulses of government, period. But he is still got a leftist agenda, a lot of ideas, more of a traditional liberal. He's not neo-Marxist. He likes capitalism. And he's going to be quite a challenge for the Democratic Party because he's going to be a disruptive force in the election. It's going to be very interesting to watch. I think we're getting into an extremely interesting election cycle, and I do intend to follow it very closely, and we'll be commenting on it in the show. Okay, so if we go back, a truly insane woke policy is this Health Canada, which reads just like a Frankfurt School critical theory, which is Marxism. They're basically saying that the problem with global warming is capitalism, and that we have to understand that the core value of liberty and individualism is destructive to the climate because it doesn't have the collective action that we need. So he wants to shift to this collectivist idea that we have to preserve the Earth's climate for the public good. And if that means not having cars, not having... Mark Morano, I think, was quite eloquent on this. He was on I believe he was on Fox and Fox's program with Brian Kilmeade, who's not necessarily one of my favorites, but what you have with Mark saying, which I thought was quite good, he was saying about the climate. First, first they come for your energy, then they come for your gas-powered cars, your freedom of movement, your cheap flights, and now they're coming for your food. This is what Morano said, suggesting that New York Mayor Eric Adams would eventually try to outlaw the consumption of meat, when in fact he's only pledged to limit the spending of city funds on it. They're going to come after our modern diet, Morano said. You'll eat nothing but be happy, according to his plan. Well, again, I see this creep in terms of where the left is headed. The left does want complete totalitarian control. The climate agenda, I think, is more about imposing these values of neo-Marxism than it is about true, legitimate concern for the climate. And when you see Canada's health organization going completely woke, well, what you know is happening is that the left is pushing an agenda that will promote this kind of critical theory, neo-Marxism. They want the attack on the culture, on families, on religion, on God. All of this goes together. I mean, it's like AOC saying that in order to eliminate global warming, we have to end racism. Well, I cover that in my book on the energy, and saying basically that the environmentalist movement has been taken over by the neo-Marxists. That's the same thing basically that Robert Kennedy Jr. is saying, and I agree with him. The globalists and the neo-Marxists who want to destroy individual freedom and destroy capitalism. But the problem is with these ideas, they don't work. And that's, I think, the core idea I want to get across in this is that fundamentally, if these ideas were truth-based, if they could be factually demonstrated to work, they would already work. There's a very, very good article that's written now today it's from the Manhattan Institute, and it's basically about the folly of trying to use wind, solar, and batteries to replace hydrocarbon fuels. This is, I think, a extremely good article. I want to play a video here in a minute, but it's by this Mark Mills, who essentially is looking at the fact that the wind, solar, battery technology does not work, is not sufficiently powerful to fuel modern industrial states, and is extremely costly and not particularly green, not particularly emission-free carbon dioxide. So, Chris, do we have ready to show this little video? The video was produced by the California Insider. It's now posted on a tweet from the Manhattan Institute.
The real question is, where are the emissions associated with the electric car? Because what you do with an electric vehicle is you don't eliminate emissions, you export them somewhere else. You have to dig up about 500,000 pounds of materials to make a single 1,000-pound battery. It takes 100 to 300 barrels of oil to manufacture a battery that can hold 1 barrel of oil equivalent of energy. Just manufacturing the battery can have a carbon debt ranging from 10 tons to 40 tons of CO2. And the plans that are in place to increase the use of batteries will require an increase in production of minerals like lithium, cobalt, zinc, demand for those minerals will increase between 400% and 4,000%. There isn't enough mining in the world to make enough batteries for that many people for their car. There's no such thing, of course, as a zero emissions vehicle.
It's a very good video. California Insiders to be congratulated on that. And I think also Mark Mills did a great job. The report is really worth reading in detail. I'm going to try to give you a couple little sections of what they're saying, but it is they're saying basically global economies are facing a potential energy shock, the third such shock of the past half century. And again, I think this is going to combine with the commercial real estate collapse, and the home mortgage collapse is not far behind it, and the collapse of the banking system, de-dollarization. This Manhattan Institute continues, energy costs and security have returned to center stage as the realization that the world remains deeply dependent on reliable supplies of petroleum, natural gas, and coal. And all this has arrived during an inflation itself partly the result of higher energy prices that are raising production and transportation costs across industries. I've been saying this for really years. In these circumstances, policymakers are beginning to grasp the enormous difficulty of replacing even a mere 10% share of global hydrocarbons, the share supplied by Russia. Never mind the impossibility of trying to replace all of society's use of hydrocarbon with solar, wind, and battery technologies, calling it SWB, solar, wind, battery technologies. 2 decades of aspirational policies and trillions of dollars in spending, most of it on solar, wind, battery tech, have not yielded an energy transition that eliminates hydrocarbons. Regardless of the climate-inspired motivations, it's a dangerous illusion to believe that spending yet more and more quickly will do so. That's what the Biden administration is doing. Let's spend another $1 trillion and promote solar and wind. It won't work. The EU is doing the same. Let's build a gigantic wind turbine farm in the North Sea so we can power 300 million homes with electricity, whatever their aspirations are. But I mean, it's ridiculous. So to continue reading here, he says regardless of the climate-inspired motivations, it's a dangerous illusion to believe that spending yet more and more quickly will do so. The lessons of the recent decade make it clear that solar, wind, and battery technologies cannot be surged in time of need and are neither inherently clean nor even independent of hydrocarbons and are not cheap. The only path to significantly lower energy prices while maintaining vibrant economies and unlinking them from Russian oil and natural gas is to radically increase the production of hydrocarbons. The U.S. holds the greatest potential for achieving this outcome and without government subsidies. On the contrary, increasing the production of these energies, wind, solar, and battery, will generate government revenues, increase U.S. geopolitical soft power, and in due course, if we did go to hydrocarbons, would save the world trillions of dollars. And not have to use all this government revenue. We could have America's hydrocarbon-centric industries could, if unleashed, replace the unprecedented growth in oil and natural gas production for over the past 15 years. The growth resulted in the U.S. becoming the world's biggest producer and a major exporter of both. The critical question now is whether America has the political will to forge an energy path based on the lessons learned and the urgencies of the new geopolitical language. In other words, are we going to abandon economic sense for this ideological idea that we have to eliminate carbon dioxide in order to save the world? Carbon dioxide is a trace molecule in the atmosphere, and eliminating carbon dioxide is not going to be the solution. It is not the driver of the Earth's temperature. 70% of all these factors that reduce global warming factors are basically water vapor. That's the major, not hydrocarbon, not carbon dioxide emitted by hydrocarbon fuels. It's really a very minor impact. We've had ice ages and much more carbon dioxide, much more in the atmosphere than we have today. I want to and I'll get Chris to make a comment, but I want to end with our other major sponsor today. We're bringing on a third very quickly, but My Vital C. I've been using this now for 4 years. I'll swear by this My Vital C. Again, go to our sponsors, you pull down My Vital C, and you'll basically see that this is carbon 60. It's a remarkable molecule that was discovered about 40 years ago. 3 scientists won a Nobel, I guess it was either a Pulitzer or Nobel. Nobel, of course, Nobel Prize in Physics, I believe they won it, for discovering carbon 60. It's a molecule that has 60 atoms of carbon around a nucleus, and it has tremendous impacts on longevity. Again, it's a health supplement. It's not a FDA-approved drug, but while you can basically get control of your own health, and it has skin products, it has hair products. I find it to be producing energy, producing much more vitality, increasing thinking power. I just give them a try. They also have My Vital C for cats and dogs, and the cats and dogs love it. I can attest to our pets who have gotten quite fond of it. You don't have to force this to them. They love it. And I think you'll see that these are products that are beneficial. That's why we have them. And I hope you'll give them a try. If you want to support the program, this is one way to do it. Chris, any final comments as we're wrapping up today?
I want to allude back to what you said about the EU, Hungary, Poland, and Italy.
Right.
Hungary has been on to the EU and its movements for a long time, and so has Poland. I'm curious to see if NATO's push to have Ukraine involved in the treaty organization, and potentially, and I'm going to guess, towards the EU, where would they side, considering there's vast cultural differences between Eastern Europeans and the Western Europeans? Mainly, a lot of the Eastern Europeans know their history and know what life is like, at least through stories from their grandparents about living under communism and socialism.
Well, it's interesting when the Prime Minister of Hungary, Viktor Orban, met with President Trump in the Oval Office. He brought a copy of my book on the basically the book was translated into Hungarian. It was basically my book about the deep state and Donald Trump's need to defeat the deep state. And I was very pleased to see that. They actually discussed the book in the Oval Office. And it really was quite rewarding to think that, that it got that level of attention. The book was called Killing the Deep State, The Fight to Save President Trump. And I was concerned. The book came out in 2018. I was already at that point concerned about what the left was going to try to do in the 2020 election. And I think as we cover the election, it'll be very interesting to see Donald Trump surfacing again. He certainly, for the core base of the Republican Party, has by far the strongest leadership and most popular. So this is going to be, we're going to continue to fight out this cultural Maoism that dominates the left. And I think over time, I agree with what Tucker Carlson said. He said that the truth will prevail, and all that we're experiencing in the universities and the like, this is lunacy and will pass. I believe it will pass too. I think it's the average person still has too much common sense to understand that these ideas of the radical left, including the climate ideas, just don't work. So let's wrap it up. I like to keep this right at about a half an hour. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi, and today is Thursday, April 27th, 2023. Thank you for joining us. In the end, God always wins. God will win here too. And we'll be back tomorrow for our last show this week. We're going to broadcast every weekday. And we're very pleased to have you joining us again. I'm back. I'm writing again. I'm producing books, doing podcasts, and very pleased to be back with you. Thank you for joining us. God bless.